Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us live on YouTube. With me here is Mr. Bassey, Emmanuel. Is going to be our guest speaker for today. And Mr. I'll just do a quick introduction before we actually begin the conversation. Mr. Emmanuel Bassey is a commercial and corporate lawyer. Is a senior associate at SPA Ajibade and Co. Is an arbitrator, a clean energy and climate change law enthusiast. He's also a creative writer and an international and public affairs analyst. He was recently recognized by Mondak as one of the foremost thought leaders in clean energy and environmental law. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Emmanuel. It's a pleasure to have you on the call today with us.
Thank you, Ololade, for having me. I'm glad to be here
Awesome.
on the show.
Awesome. Um, so we'll get right into the conversation. Of course, the topic is legal framework for clean and renewable energy in Nigeria. I know there's a lot of buzz around clean energy. Everybody's talking about renewable energy, clean energy. How do we deal with the climate change crisis? How do we? If a lot of organizations are now beginning to support green tech entrepreneurs, so we see that there's that move in that side, right? Everybody is talking about how to build sustainable practices, business practices around green innovation. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Apologies. I guess
Okay.
I guess I guess it's
Sorry.
weather or something.
Sorry
Okay,
about
so
that.
everybody, thank you very much. So everybody has everybody has been talking about green energy. Sorry, I have a slight cough.
It's okay.
So yeah, I'm back. Everybody has been talking about green energy, sustainable business practices that supports green tech entrepreneurs. So I just thought to bring in a foremost expert, in that space to talk to us about some of the legal frameworks, the policies in that space, and what exactly investors should be looking out for, right, from the legal perspective, and even entrepreneurs as well from the legal perspective. What should they be looking out for in terms of venturing into green entrepreneurship and clean energy? So we'll begin this conversation. So I'd just like to ask, sir, from your own point of view, what do you think renewable energy is from your own point of view?
Okay, so when we are talking about energy, we are basically talking about um, the things that power the world. We have energy sources that deal with maybe automobiles, the energy you use to power your car, the energy that we use for our day-to-day activities like electricity and what have you, and then the energy that we use in industry. So this energy that all these are what we refer to as power or energy, and then they come from different sources. One of them is a renewable source, and the other ones are non-renewable sources. So the energy that has been powering the world over the past few hundreds of years has been mostly non-renewable energy, and these sources of energy are mostly out of fossil fuels like coal, and then we have crude oil that we use to produce petrol, diesel, and all many other kinds of energy. Now, the problem with those energies are that number one is that those sources of energy are that number one, they are not, they cannot replenish themselves. So as they are being used to power the world, they are being depleted.
Mm.
Number two is that as they are also being used, they are big emitters of greenhouse gases. And what are these greenhouse gases? They are gases that, yes, they are good, they're useful in their own way, but they create what is called the greenhouse effect on the atmosphere. Now, when we talk about global warming, it's basically caused by the greenhouse gases that have accumulated on the atmosphere. So what happens is that as the sun shines on the earth, it brings heat to the earth, and then when the heat bounces on the ground and on other surfaces of the earth, and then it should bounce back into the atmosphere. But because we have greenhouse gases on the atmosphere, they trap those heats and keep them on the atmosphere. Now, the greenhouse effect is good on its own because one, it keeps the earth warm enough for life to be able to survive. Let's say that there
Definitely.
was no greenhouse effect on the atmosphere. What would happen is that when the sun goes up in the evening, the world become extremely cold. The average temperature in any part of the world at any time would be something maybe in minus 18 degrees Celsius, and not many people would be able to survive under that kind of temperature for a long time. It might even get worse than that. So the greenhouse effect helps to keep the earth warm enough at the time that the sun has maybe left a particular region of the earth, so that that region can support life on its own. But when
Mm.
the greenhouse gas becomes too much, it traps much more heat on the earth.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that causes the sea or the oceans to also become warm.
Yeah.
As the oceans become warm, it results in what is called thermal expansion. Thermal
Yeah.
expansion will now expand the ocean, and then it leads to a rise in sea level. A rise in sea level will then result in floodings, and then lands that would have been used for farming will be flooded because there is too much water in the sea. And then in the polar regions, they also suffer because when the heat becomes too much, the icebergs begin to melt and they all
Yeah.
pour into the ocean. And then the ocean also now begins to overflow its banks as a result of the rise in sea levels. This cause
Fantastic.
flooding, and apart from the flooding and the other aspect of it that are related to the ocean, there's also a problem with the heat in the world. Because of too much heat, there is drought. If you look at the most of the crisis that we have in Nigeria, the farmers' elders crisis, it's just basically because of drought, because there is no more grazing land for the herders to use. They just move into the farmlands of farmers, and it causes problems. So these are the reasons why it has become imperative to move away from non-renewable energy sources, because they emit greenhouse gases that cause too much problems for the environment. So it's not just a problem for us today; it also causes problems for generations tomorrow.
Generations to come. Yeah.
So the world has now seen that if we continue using greenhouse gases, the average temperature in the world will continue to rise, and it will become a problem because of the
Yeah.
cascading effect that it will have. So the energy now of the world is for the world to now put all its energy towards renewable energy sources. That's why you see
Mm.
that mostly in the European countries, you have seen that they have set targets to do away with combustion engine vehicles and looking into
Yeah.
electric vehicles between 2030 and 2060. Most of them have also set targets to transition from non-renewable energy sources to renewable energy sources. So basically, renewable energy sources are energy sources that can, one, replenish themselves over time, and then they are also clean in the sense that they do not emit greenhouse gases. So
Fan-
examples of renewable energy sources are hydropower, power that you can get from the sea, maybe from a dam, is an example of a renewable energy source. We cannot set up finish at any point in time. And then solar power also is a source, a form of renewable energy source. Then we have biomass. Those are renewable energy sources. So the world is looking at how do we now power the world using those renewable energy sources, such as hydropower, solar power, biomass, and what have you, so that the world will be a cleaner and safer place for everyone to stay. So basically, that is what renewable energy is: energy that can replenish itself and also does not emit greenhouse gases.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I like how you explained it from the challenges, down to the solutions. And you gave us a solid reason and a solid background why renewable energy is very, very important, not just for us, but also for future generations to come. And I think that's why everybody is really talking about it. I think that's why there's so much noise and fuse about it, because renewable energy is really the next big thing now. I mean, that's where all the investors are, that's where people are running to. Why? Because we are not just safeguarding ourselves now, we are safeguarding the future, we are safeguarding the next generation, ensuring that the people that we are leaving behind, right, when a generation passes by, would be able to live safely in the environment, and also, of course, enjoy nature as well, without inhabiting unnecessary pollution in the environment that can cause ill health and damage to them. So thank you for that fantastic background. Um, so I would like to ask, what really is there really a legal framework for renewable energy? I know it's a fresh new space, but is there really a legal framework for renewable energy in Nigeria?
Yes, in Nigeria, well, yes, we can say that there is, or let's say there are legal frameworks for renewable energy in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria has committed itself to a lot of international agreements that mandates Nigeria to begin to transition from the use of fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. So, for example, Nigeria signed up to the Paris Agreement, which sets a target for its signatories to see how they can keep the average rise in temperature at about 1.5 degrees Celsius above 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial times. So, one of the things that we are mandated to do as a nation is to make policies and laws that will help us as a people and as individuals and as institutions to transition from non-renewable energy sources to renewable energy sources. One of the things that Nigeria did in response to that was to enact the Climate Change Act. So the Climate Change Act is basically sets a framework for Nigeria to implement policies towards achieving a greener nation, a greener society. We also have different other regulations and laws that have also been made in order to ensure that Nigeria transitions to renewable energy sources. Principal among them, if we are looking at the power generation aspect of it, in fact, up until yesterday, the principal legislation that governed the power industry in Nigeria was the Electric Power Sector Reforms Act of 2005. But yesterday, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed into law the Nigerian Electricity Act 2003, which repealed the Electric Power Sector Reforms Act of 2005 and also sets some very key legal framework for renewable energy in Nigeria. Now, what that act has done is that, yes, there were other regulations and laws that were made in order to ensure that a clean energy is generated in Nigeria, but the Electricity Act of 2003 has now made it mandatory for most of the power generation companies, power distribution companies, and power transmission companies to actually invest in renewable energy. So, for example, the Electricity Act, it says that yes, for it sets an obligation for power generation companies that the power that they're going to generate per time, a substantial part of it should come from renewable energy sources. So if they have that obligation, it also means that either they themselves will invest in renewable energy in order for them to meet that obligation, or they will also now look for renewable energy investors that they can buy their power from. You understand? And then apart from the Electricity Act, there are also some other regulations that have been made in Nigeria pursuant to, okay, since the Electricity Act just came into force yesterday, then they
Yeah.
made the extant regulations were made pursuant to the Nigerian Electric Power Sector Reforms Act. So there are many regulations under that set to encourage investment in renewable energy. And some of them, like the renewable energy feed-in tariffs regulation, what that did was that to ensure that if you are going to invest in renewable energy, then there will be a sort of guarantee that the power that you are going to generate from that renewable energy source will be bought over by the government. We have a Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company (PLC). Their business basically is to buy electricity from producers. So if you are into the renewable energy production, then you have that guarantee that when you produce power, so that there's a guarantee that this power that you have produced will be bought over by the Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company and also fed into the national grid. So there were various regulations that were made to encourage investment in renewable energy, apart from the extant or principal regulation that was Nigeria Electric Power Sector Reforms Act, now Electricity Act.
Fantastic. I know you said a whole lot. After this section, I'm going to have to go back to listen again. But I think I picked a few things. You mentioned that there's the Climate Change Act. There's a new act that's been signed by Tinubu yesterday. I think I got that update before this particular section. Then you also mentioned the Electric Power Resource Act. I don't know if I'm correct.
Electric Power
2000.
Sector Reforms Act. It has been repealed now by Electricity Act.
Okay, so the Electricity Act is now the recent law.
Yes.
Okay, Electricity Act 2003, 23. So, are there any other principal regulations apart from these ones that governs renewable and clean energy in Nigeria?
But when you're talking about principal regulations,
Yes.
the those are the principal regulations. Other regulations are made pursuant to mostly the Electricity Act, which before now was the Electric Power Sector Reforms Act. So the principal regulation really in Nigeria that encourages clean energy production is the Electricity Act of 2003. But there are other regulations that have been made by, there's a body that regulates power generation, distribution, and transmission in Nigeria, and that is the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. So they have been mandated by law to make regulations in various areas of power generation that will deal with various issues. And one of the things that they have actively dealt with over time is the issue of generation of renewable energy. So they are principally responsible for making those regulations. So there are a lot of regulations that have been made in various areas that deal with these issues, depending on which are particular aspect of renewable energy that they want to deal with.
Fantastic. So I know we've already mentioned the list of the major principal regulations governing the renewable energy sector in Nigeria.
Yes.
I'm having a really heavy cough, and I
I'm
wasn't
sorry
having
about that.
this cough before now. I don't know,
I hope you have
honestly.
had some water to drink.
Maybe I should go and get some water.
I think so.
So I'm back. Thank you.
All right.
Yes. So I would also like to ask as well. Um, so in terms of venturing into oil and gas business or renewable energy business, is there really a need to obtain license? Right. So as lawyers, we are always playing in the space. We are always, helping, assisting entrepreneurs to get access to markets, right?
Yes.
Helping them to go through the regulatory bottlenecks and all of that, right? And even in terms of legal compliance too as well. So what do you think in terms of licensing in the oil and gas business? How does it work out? I mean, how does it play out?
Okay. All right. I mean, maybe before I answer that particular question, let me just make a point in relation to the regulations for renewable energy in Nigeria. And I mentioned earlier that the Nigerian Electricity Act was enacted just yesterday. Now, that act has also has sort of deregulated the electricity sector in Nigeria, which means that states are also are now empowered to generate transmit and distribute electricity. That also means that in the nearest future, I mean, in fact, beginning from now, that most regulations that will govern the energy sector in Nigeria will be made by state governments. And apart from that, so though there are only three states in Nigeria that have made regulations regarding electricity distribution, like I think Lagos, Kaduna, and those state governments. Other states also are going to follow suit based on the enactment of this new Electricity Act. And then also just if I may mention some other legislation that may somehow affect anybody that is going into renewable energy business, because I mean there's an Environmental Impact Assessment Act which basically is supposed to help you to ensure that whatever venture you're going into, you are aware of the environmental it's going to have, and then you are also taking steps to ameliorate any effects or negative effects it may have on the environment. And then there are various other regulations that deal with obtaining licenses and permits, which are going to at this moment. So in terms of licenses and permits, I don't know whether you want me to deal with the renewable energy aspect of it first, or you want to deal with oil and gas. But maybe let's just start with renewable energy, because if you
Yes,
want to
by
go
all
into
means, we
all right,
can deal with renewable energy and then come to oil and gas.
all right. So if you are going to the renewable energy business, then the principal body that are going to deal with is number one, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Yes, you may also have a cost to deal with the Ministry of Water Resources if you are going to hydropower. You may also have cost to deal with the Ministry of Power and Ministry of Environment, depending on exactly what you want to do. But before you can venture into electricity generation business in Nigeria or renewable energy business in Nigeria, you need a license from the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. And in this license, although let me just clarify this point that there are some ventures that you can go into that you may not need a license. So if you are going to establish a venture that is going to generate less than maybe from 1 megawatts of electricity below, then you do not need a license from the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. What you just need is a permit. Just let them know, okay, I'm going to establish this facility that is going to generate electricity. But this electricity is not going to be above 1 megawatt that I'm going to generate from this particular facility. And then if you're also going to distribute electricity, if you're not distributing more than 100 kilowatts of electricity, you do not need a license. But if you're going to go anywhere above that, then you need licenses. And the various licenses that are available in Nigeria, we have the power generation license. That will give you a permission or empower you to establish a facility that will generate power in Nigeria and then sell to off-takers. We have transmission license. That transmission license, as of now, it is only the transmission company of Nigeria that has that license, because they are the only ones empowered to carry out a transmission of electricity in Nigeria. So maybe any other person cannot do that. But with the new Electricity Act that have been signed into law, many people or many states will be able to give these licenses out to various individuals and corporate bodies that may want to obtain them. And then we also have the system operations license. So this license is to a licensee who must adhere to terms and conditions set up by the commission in respect of operation of the systems surrounding the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. So if you are going to any of those value chain, then you must have that kind of license from the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Then we have the distribution license. Of course, we know of the co-electricity company, we have the electric and the other ones. That's the kind of license that they have. So it's basically given to anyone that wants to distribute electricity. So what happens in this, if you are looking for a distribution license, then you must enter into maybe an agreement with Jambok Electricity Trading Company to buy electricity from them, or you may also have an agreement with some other mini grid operators. If there is a renewable energy operator, maybe when your license area, you can also enter into agreements with them for you to obtain electricity power from them. And then we have a trading license, which also gives you the a license to be able to trade in power or electricity. So if anybody is going to renewable energy business, then mostly what he would need would be either a generation license or a trading license, or both of them actually. Because one, the generation license will enable you to be able to generate electricity, and then the trading license will give you the license to be able to sell your electricity to off-takers. So basically, those are the main licenses that anyone that wants to get into the electricity business in Nigeria has to obtain. And if we are going to talk about a generation license, there are basically three types of power generation licenses that you can also obtain in Nigeria. Number one is what they call the on-grid generation license. That license gives you the power to generate electricity, but you must transmit that electricity to the national grid. You know that the way Nigerian electricity works, that most of the power that we generate comes through the national grid. It's only a few communities, or should I say estates, that have been able to isolate their own power generation and then try to have something different from others. But in Nigeria, everybody just puts power into the national power grid and then transmits. Whether you are in Oshobo or you are in Corona generating power, whatever that you are going to generate, you have to put it into the national grid. So if you are going to get a license, you may get the on-grid power generation license. And then there's also what is called embedded power generation license. That one will allow you to generate electricity and maybe sell to distributors close to you. So
Okay.
that does not mean that you are not putting it to the national grid. It's just that instead of you passing it straight to the transmission company of Nigeria, you are passing it directly to the power distributors. So, for example, the Ikeja Electric can decide to buy power from a person that has an embedded power generation license. So they can just immediately, the word embedded means that just putting it straight into the distribution network. So that is what you will get. So instead of you having an agreement with Transmission Company of Nigeria and Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company PLC, you just go straight to the distribution companies, because you have that license to just sell
Okay.
electricity straight to them. And then we have the off-grid power generation license. Off-grid means that whatever power that you are going to generate does not go into the national grid, does not go into the distribution network. So what you may do is that you may want to get that power and distribute it, and use it for your own self only. So a lot of industries can do this. So if you have heard of industries or companies that maybe have their own power plants and they generate electricity and for their own use only, most of them have this kind of off-grid license. And then you may also say, okay, I have this power. Maybe the neighboring communities within my visit area of operation, and I want to give them power as well. Then you can also give it to those communities. But that your power that you have generated will not get into the national grid. That's why it is called off grid. It stays within a particular vicinity, either for your own use only or for maybe for the use of a small community that is around you. So basically, that is that about licenses, obtaining licenses, and the kind of licenses available for power generation in Nigeria. And
Fantastic.
okay,
That's a
okay,
really, really broad overview. Wow. Really, really broad overview. But when it comes to renewable energy,
yes.
all these licenses, do they really apply? because renewable energy is more like you are, like you mentioned, you're using technology that, let's say for example, green
Yes.
tech innovations. You're using technology um that enables people to use power in such a way that it doesn't cause environmental pollution, and it
Yeah.
doesn't release the gas emissions into the atmosphere. Okay, so but when we come from because what I was hearing, I might be wrong, but when you were talking, what I was really hearing was in terms of the real power, the
Yes.
power sector in Nigeria, how the
Mm.
licenses are done over there. But when it comes to renewable energy, does it really apply?
It would apply. I mentioned earlier that there is a certain level of power generation that you may carry out that you will not need a license. So if a
Yes.
person that is involved in a green innovation wants to generate electricity just maybe for himself that is less than 1 megawatt, then he doesn't need any license. So maybe you want to, uh, you have invented maybe solar batteries or panels or something, and you want people to use that for to generate a solar electricity in their houses. You may not need a license for that because those ones are just very minor. They are just a small player in the industry.
In the industry, yeah.
Yes, you are not affecting a large number of people, and the amount of power that you are generating is not so much and per time. So what the person needs for his home is just a few maybe kilowatts or whatever of electricity. But where you are now looking at going on a large scale, trying to maybe generate electricity to supply to a much bigger population, that is when you will need all those licenses. But as long as you are number one generating from what and below, you don't need a license. If you are also distributing electricity to people and the amount of electricity that you are generating and distributing is no more than 100 kilowatts, you don't need a license for that. But when you are now going to anything that is on a large scale, then you will need a license.
I see. I see. Fantastic. So it's basically based on the amount of power that you're generating as a business that
Yes,
determines the license that you will need to run the business.
yes,
Okay. So I think you've spoken about the regulatory bodies, but I'd like you to highlight again what major regulatory bodies do we have? We are lawyers, and from time
yes.
to time we have to deal with regulatory bodies to navigate the regulatory landscape for startups and business owners. So what key bodies? So if a green tech entrepreneur comes to meet me today and they're doing very major work in green tech in Nigeria, and they want
Yeah.
me to navigate the regulatory landscape for them, how do I begin? I know sometimes it can be business specific, but what are
Yes.
the major,
So
regulatory bodies that I have to interact with?
for a person that is going into the green energy business, the principal regulator is the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. They're the ones that
Mm,
will set standards and then monitor compliance and all of those things. They're the ones that issue permits and so many other things that you need, anything that you need really to be able to participate in the electricity sector in Nigeria. You must go to the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Apart from them, you may also need to get some maybe permits from the Federal Ministry of Power Works and Housing, because I mean what you're looking going into is power basically. So that is their territory. And then I mentioned also that you may also need to deal with a transmission company of Nigeria if you're going to transmit power to the national grid. And then if you're also going to look for buyers, as in if you're going to transmit power to the national grid, then you also have to deal with the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company because they are the ones that will negotiate the terms of the purchase of your power that you have generated. And then we also have what is called Nigerian Electricity Liability Management Company. They are just dealing with they basically deal with liabilities and assets of power of companies in the power industry. So you one way or the other register with them. And then we also have what was called the Rural Electrification Agency. Now this agency was set up under the Electric Power Sector Reforms Act, principally to encourage all these small investment. When you're talking about green energy, most of the times what you're dealing with is a small amount of energy that you're going to generate per time. So now they discovered that. most people in the rural community do not have access to the national grid or to electricity. Basically, what they say, in fact, said in Nigeria is that out of the over 200 million people that we have in Nigeria, only about 90 million have access to electricity. So
Mm-hmm.
the other part of the population that do not have access to electricity, they established what is called the Rural Electrification Agency. I think under the Electricity Act 2003, that has been changed to Electrification, Rural Electrification, I think Renewable Energy Agency. So they are trying to merge their goals together with also the use of renewable energy. So their aim basically was to see how they could use renewable energy to power rural communities. Nigeria has a lot of potentials in terms of solar power, wind power, and
Yeah.
hydropower. Because if you go to the north, they have an average on the average maybe 7 hours of peak electricity per day. In the south, we have like 3.5 hours of peak electricity per day. So if you can harness all of this power and then use it for solar energy, it will go a long way to help to relieve the pressure on the national grid. So what they basically said was that okay, the rural communities, we have the potential to develop solar electricity in those communities. If you can develop maybe any project or make any investment that can help us to supply electricity to maybe 100 people in a particular community, okay, they are coming. They have what they call a rural electrification fund, I think so. Fund. That fund, the federal government has provided some. I think they also get international donors as well, so they can give you cheap loans for you to be able to access and then make investments in the rural communities, principally in respect of renewable energy. So if you are going to go into that kind of business or investment, then you will need to deal with the rural energy, rural electrification agency, now called rural electrification and renewable energy agency. So that's basically that for the agencies that you have to deal with when you're talking about renewable energy in Nigeria.
Wow. It seemed like a whole lot. Wow. 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 This is an interesting area, but there's also a whole lot to catch up on and a
Yeah,
whole lot to learn. I'm sure that even our viewers, because this is a recorded section, is going
yeah,
live on YouTube, I'm sure, and it's something that people can actually watch after this section because it's going to be hosted on
yeah.
YouTube. So I'm pretty sure that by
Mm,
the time viewers will start to listen, they'll be able to glean from your depth of knowledge and to
mm.
start to see how they can even, tap into the opportunities in this space as well. Fantastic. Thank you very much,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Emmanuel. So I'd just like to know, I know that there are intellectual property considerations for green entrepreneurs. I mean, it's something that is going to really grow big in Nigeria. In fact, it's
Yeah.
already growing big, right? And I know there'll be considerations for patents, depending on how innovative,
Mm.
the intellectual property innovations are. There'll be considerations for, so what are your thoughts in terms of intellectual property considerations for green entrepreneurs? What should they be on the lookout for? You know, how should they position themselves so that they can actually exploit their IP rights properly in the market?
Okay. So, I mean, for a lot of innovators in the green space, they are going to interact with almost all the ranges of intellectual property rights. Because number one, for a person going into a green innovation, you may have to deal with patents. What a lot of people fail to do is that when they want to start up in a business, they think, okay, let's just start and then do a lot of branding, publicity, and what have you. They do not think of how to register that company that they're going to use for business. They do not think of how to trademark their intellectual property rights and what have you. So most of the time they go into the business and start doing all of these things and then realize, oh, let's register this company, let's register this trademark. And most of the time, by the time they go back there, someone else might have taken that name or taken that mark and what have you. So for a person that is going into the green business or doing any kind of green innovation, what they should think of first is, okay, you have a name, right? Maybe we should. I think the first thing that they should really do is go to the Corporate Affairs Commission, register your name, and ensure that you have a certificate. And then that's your name. You can also trademark it so that no one else will just go and say, oh, of course, some people can decide to say, register one name with CSE and then start using another name for their own business, probably because it sounds more catchy or it's more popular. So trademark that name so that no other person can go and try to use the name. If you have a logo that is special in one way or the other, what you should first of all do before you even go and start pushing your business out there is to ensure that you will register your trademark in respect of that particular logo design or name. So that is in terms of trademark, that you must ensure that you register your name or trademark your name, sorry, trademark your logo. Do you have any design? Trademark it. And then in terms of patents, if you have done any kind of inventions, patents really protects inventions.
Yeah.
So if you have maybe invented a particular, let's say, solar battery design, panel design, or what have you, and you know that, oh, this one is peculiar, it's original, you're the one that created it by yourself. Before you push it out to the market, or before you even invite investors to come in to say, oh, let's see how we can invest in this product, whether it will blow. I mean, a lot of times people hesitate because they think this thing will not blow or may not succeed. Let's just go and try it out. If you wait for too long and allow it to succeed first before you go and register, it becomes a problem.
Mm,
So, as you're setting out into in business, as you are drawing up your business plan, ensure that you register that your patent if you have a particular invention that you have done. So you register it first before you go into the business. I mean, I know I said it, that green innovations will cut across every area of intellectual property rights. The same thing also goes with industrial design. If you are doing anything that involves any kind of industrial design, register it immediately. Copyright
mm,
also comes in depending on what you are doing. Everything depends on exactly
yeah,
what you are doing. So copyright protects creative works, musical works, sounds, writings, and all of those things. So when copyright is automatic anyway, but I mean you may still want to register it for to ensure
yeah.
that the world knows about the fact that you are the one that owns this copyright.
To
So
give a notification to
yes,
to
yeah.
NCC. Yeah.
And then you may also have trade secrets that you want to protect. The interesting thing about trade secrets is that it is protected under common law. So there is no regulation that deals with how you can register a trade secret. As long as you can keep it secret, you can protect it. And if anybody wants to come to steal it, maybe by reverse engineering, they say, okay, this thing, let's look at how this person was able to construct this thing and all of those things. And then they now reverse engineer your work and then go and see, okay, this is how they do it. If someone now goes in there to now do that, if they are able to prove that, oh, this person is stealing my intellectual or my trade secret, then you can go and sue to restrain that person from doing that. So, I mean, basically, those are the various intellectual property rights and how they can interplay in green energy investment and innovations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for pointing out patents, copyright, trademarks, even industrial designs. I
Yeah.
mean, we work with Quadloop Technologies. They are also a renewable energy company.
Mm.
They recycle wasted batteries and then they use it to produce household appliances, solar
Mm.
lanterns, big size. So they are basically a manufacturing company and they do
Yeah.
some little bit of work in tech as well. So we had to advise them on intellectual property strategy, intellectual property protection. So one of the things we did for them was we protected the aesthetic features of their designs.
Yeah.
So the colors, the look and the feel. So we did an industrial design for some of their innovative products, right? So
Mm.
I mean, it's important. These are important
Yes,
considerations.
it's very, very important. So anybody that's going into renewable energy space must take those things very, very important because it could be the difference between success and failure of your business. If you have invested so much in your business, in your name, in your design, then someone steals it and you can do nothing about it because that person registered it way ahead of you. I mean, you will struggle. Maybe you can shout and then do all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, if that person has registered that name before you now go to court and start trying to see how you can prove that, oh, you were the first user and all of those things. So it's better that you avoid those problems and ensure that as you are stepping out, anything unique about your business, you seek legal advice about which aspect of intellectual property it will fall into and ensure that it's
Exactly.
registered.
Exactly. Quite enlightening. Quite enlightening. I know we've spoken about the recent policies in the space. We spoke about the new act that was just signed
Yeah.
yesterday by President Tinubu. I don't know if there are any other policies, not just regulations now, policies that enable energy investment in Nigeria.
I mean, yes, there are a few policies or incentives. I mentioned earlier the Rural Electrification Agency and how they seek to encourage investment in clean energy in Nigeria. I mean, there's also there are really a lot of funds, I mean, policies that have been made. Just that, in Nigeria, we make so many policies, but we do not really follow through with them. Because if you go through the years from 2001 up to date, there have been maybe more than 20 policies trying to deal with renewable energy. But I mean, the ones that I would say maybe have uh, provide some kinds of incentives. Now, I would just mention there's what is called Value Added Tax Modification Act. So the act seeks to exempt some renewable energy equipment from value added tax. So if you are buying those equipment or importing them into the country, as you are buying them, they are exempted from value added tax. Some examples of such equipment that have been exempted are wind power generators. So if you are buying anything to invest in wind power, then that will be value added tax exempted. And then we also have a solar power generator. So it also falls under the same category of those things that have been exempted from VAT. So I mean, there are just a few of them. I can't really mention them offhand now because, but if you look at that act, Value Added Tax Modification Act, it lists out a number of equipment that will be used for renewable energy projects specifically that have been exempted from value added tax. So anybody going into that space already has some incentives to go into the space because he knows that okay, if I'm going to purchase equipment, I will have tax relief in this area. So that's one of the incentives available. Then we also have what is called solar power connection facility project. The project is basically it's a 40 billion naira kind of fund that was put together. It's being managed by the Rural Electrification Agency and the Central Bank of Nigeria. So what they do is that anyone that wants to go into a renewable energy business, you can get long-term, low-interest rate loans from the CBN, working through together with the Rural Electrification Agency for you to invest in your business. So in sense, it's for to encourage people that want to invest in renewable energy because initially people thought that it was not so attractive to invest in renewable energy. Sometimes people also felt like, well, it's too expensive. For an ordinary user, he may feel like to get a renewable energy installed in my home is too expensive. I'm paying electricity bill
Yeah,
here. I'm buying solar battery here, and so many of those
yeah,
things. So if investors have access to low credit facilities that they also can pay over a long term without being overburdened with the liability. Then they can also produce products that are cheaper and easier for people to access. So that is why that fund has been made available. Then we have another one that is called the National Gas Expansion Program. What basically that is doing is to seek for people to invest in. I mean, gas is not really in itself a renewable energy. I have to point out gas is what is called clean energy. It's a cleaner energy than regular fossil fuel like diesel, like petrol,
yeah,
kerosene, and what have you. So gas is cleaner. That is why in Nigeria, if you look at our energy transition plan, Nigeria is trying to use gas as a transition energy because the rest of the world they are fast moving away from crude oil, petrol, and what have you for their energy. So most of them are currently using gas and they are planning to move away into full blown 100% renewable energy. But for Nigeria, we are setting a target that for the time being, yes, we'll continue to use non-renewable energy sources, but we are going to use gas as a transition energy. So one of the things that have been done is to set up this fund, National Gas Expansion Program, to encourage people to invest in compressed natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas. If you have been listening to the news recently, you would have heard about when things some is it investors also who met with President Tinubu and they were now discussing how they can convert cars from petrol engine to CNG engine. So that what they're basically trying to do is to see how we can move away from people using petrol for their cars or
petrol.
diesel for their cars to using compressed natural gas or liquefied petroleum
Yeah,
gas. So now, if they are going to do that, that means that they are also going to need people that are producing this gas on a large scale and supplying it to the market. I
yeah,
read I think was it yesterday also that I read about some truck drivers converting their tankers from petrol tankers to CNG, that is compressed natural gas tankers, so that they can transport CNG from place to place and then distribute it to all over the country. So this particular program is aimed at encouraging investments in compressed natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas. And then there has been the sum of like 250 billion naira provided for it, so that if anybody wants to go into that business, then they can take loans from that fund at a low interest rate and then invest in the business. So it is only those that want to invest in that business that are eligible to access the funds. Others cannot access it. So, I mean, those are some of the incentives available to anyone that wants to go into the green energy space. There are various other ones. I think the World Bank, the German government, European Union, they are actually actively seeking to see how they can support investments in renewable energy in developing countries. So they have a lot of funds that are available that if anybody is interested, then if you go, if you can, if you have the necessary information and to access those funds, and then you are able to do your investment at a much cheaper rate than you would ordinarily do if you're taking a loan from a commercial bank.
Mm. Amazing. Amazing. I've learned a whole lot about tax exemptions and also about the recent policies, right, that have taken place in short time in respect to the
Yeah.
energy and climate change space. Thank you so much. Fantastic. This is definitely a section to go and rewatch. A
Mm.
lot of information is loaded in this section. Definitely a
Yeah.
section to rewatch. Um, so just before we wrap up, I know we've spoken about the recent Electricity Act signed by Tinubu,
Yes.
about, some minutes ago. And I know it's one of the new improvements in the power and energy sector in Nigeria. So, what would you say are some of the recent innovations in that? If you can just have two to three core major innovations from that act that will positively affect the industry as a
Yeah.
whole.
Okay. I mean, the most important innovation in the act
Yeah.
is the decentralization of electricity generation, distribution, and transmission.
Mm.
Before now, it was only the federal government that could make laws on electricity distribution, generation, and what have you. And they were the only ones that were regulating the sector. Was
Okay.
sometime last year, the constitution was amended to remove electricity from the exclusive list to the concurrent list, which means that both the federal government and the state government have the competence to make legislations on
Wow.
electricity. So, as a follow up to that, the Nigerian Electricity Act was enacted. So, what the act does basically is to liberalize the electricity sector so
Mm.
that state government will now have the power to regulate electricity. What does that mean? It means that a state government can maybe decide to establish its own power plant. The only thing they cannot do is that they cannot distribute power across state borders. But if they are within that
Okay.
particular
It
state,
has to be within
then
their states.
yes. So if you are within that particular state, then you can generate electricity and distribute within your state. That means that people that also need licenses, when something is being done at the federal level, practically you have to deal with Abuja, like it or not. You are in Sokoto, you have to go to Abuja. You are in River State, you have to go to Abuja. You are in Osun State, you have to go to Abuja. But now, once states begin to make electricity regulations, that means that if anybody wants to engage in green investments or any kind of venture in the power sector, you can go to your state government and seek for a permit or a license to do one thing or the other. It will become easier for people to carry out investments in their various states. So if you want to do just a small investment, maybe for a particular group of people, just go to a particular. You can even go to the street and say, okay, I have
Okay.
innovations to generate solar power
Mm.
that I can sell to people on this street or in this particular estate. You can get the permit and do that, generate the
Mm.
power and sell to those people and make your returns on investment. So it's going to make it easier for people to come into the renewable energy space, come into the power space for them to be able to do business. And then apart from that, generation companies have also been given renewable energy obligations, essentially in the sense that if you are going into power generation business, if you are going into power distribution business, if you are going into power transmission business, you must get your power, a part of the power that you are going to generate, distribute, or transmit from renewable energy sources. So if you are going to do that, then it means also that there must also be investment in renewable energy sources for you to be able to meet up with that obligation. So if there are no players in that sector, then you have to also go into the sector and invite players in and say, okay, I am under obligation to invest in renewable energy. I don't have enough resources to do that, but I know that you have the capacity. Come, let us partner together and see how we can develop solar energy here, how we can develop wind energy here, how we can develop hydro energy, because Nigeria has that capacity, just that we have not been able to harness potential in those sectors. But if there is now a legal obligation for people to engage in a renewable energy business, then they are bound to do it. And then when that is done and done on a large scale, or maybe there's aggregation of capital and efforts, then you see that energy access will also become easier and cheaper for people in the society. So I think that is basically the most important aspect of that act, that it has been able to decentralize electricity in Nigeria and also make it mandatory for the players in the industry to invest in renewable energy.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. It appears that Tinubu's regime is really active. Because there's also the news in town now that he has lifted the ban of cryptocurrency. So we are seeing.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I also saw in the news that CBN governor has been sacked as well. So
Yeah, it's not the sack per se in quotes, even though it
uh,
is a sack in actual fact. It has been suspended. You know,
suspended.
the person does not really have the power under the CBN Act to sack the CBN governor, but
Yeah,
because
that's true.
based on case law, he can suspend him. I mean, I'm sure he should have known that that was going to come anyway.
So it appears that we are seeing some
Yeah,
interesting
yeah, I would say
things.
so because in a way he has hit the ground running. Things that he needs to tackle head on, he has done that, and yeah, I mean, we have a sense of someone is in power actually, and is
Exactly.
conscious of what is going on in the society.
Exactly. Exactly. Fantastic. Fantastic. So, I mean, I enjoyed this conversation, quite enlightening.
Yeah,
Beginning from the legal framework down to the policies, licensing. It's a whole lot. And coupled with the fact that, we now have new regulations in this space now. So
yeah,
I will use this opportunity to charge lawyers to, take out time to revisit some of these new
yeah.
innovations and see the opportunities, because there's opportunity already,
Of course,
right?
definitely.
For people in green tech space, and even for lawyers as well, to provide regulatory compliance and advisory as well.
Mm.
I also want to especially thank you for taking out time to chat with me this afternoon, despite your busy schedule. Thank
Mhm.
you very, very much.
And
You were
thank you also for inviting me. It was a
such a
great pleasure
pleasure.
being on the show.
Also, also, it's a pleasure having you as well. Thank you for the elaborate conversations. But I was going to ask,
Yes.
are you based, SP Ajibade, are you based in Ibadan? You're based in Lagos?
No, I'm based in Lagos.
Oh, you're based in Lagos here. Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have a copy of the act, if you can share with me a copy of the
I
new
don't have
act. Probably.
I don't have it assigned. What I have is just the vision, not really the act itself, but there's a part that the National Assembly used for their own discussion. Is the
Okay.
bill, but the act itself I do not have
Yeah, the
it.
bill. Oh,
So
no
it's not
problem. As
it's,
soon
it's
as
not a, it's not a standalone bill. It contains the deliberations and what have you. So it's something that can really cause confusion. But once I get hold of the act, I will share it with you. Because even me, I
awesome.
was I was searching for it yesterday, but I think they have not posted it yet. So maybe in the next few days, it's going to come online, so we'll get it. If I see it, I'll
Definitely,
send it to you definitely.
definitely. Thank you very much. It was nice chatting and also nice learning from your depth and wealth of experience. So we'll be rounding up now. I don't know if you have any final word for our viewers who are going to eventually view the video.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that the renewable energy space is an emerging business market or opportunity. And it's something that is going to become very big in the next 5 to 10 years because lots of innovations are being geared towards that, both at national level and especially at international level. So it's something that we should be very alert and active, even as lawyers and as investors, so that we will take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging in this sector. Because I think I can see something very exciting coming up in the renewable energy space.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So right now we are rounding up. Uh, Once again, thank you, sir.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Have a fantastic day ahead.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.